Hey everybody, welcome to Across the Pitch with Dave Miller and Mike Barrera. I am one of your co-hosts, Mike Barrera as always, mbarrera1323 on Twitter, and across the pond is my good buddy and co-host, Dave. Dave, how you doing tonight?
I've been better. I've been better, sure. Rough night for Gillingham.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, how they looking this so far?
Less said the better.
let's just skip over that conversation.
Yeah.
And if you guys don't follow Dave GFC Miller, you see his Twitter handle right over there to the side of him, below me, that kind of thing. So as you guys know, for watching us all year, we've been covering the Philadelphia Union, but unfortunately, Dave, that time has now come to an end. Your Philadelphia Union were unfortunately beaten by NYCFC in Chester this past weekend, and NYCFC will advance to the MLS final to play the Portland Timbers in Portland. I believe the game's next weekend. I don't know the exact date and time.
This Saturday.
This Saturday, perfect. Okay, so this Saturday they'll be playing them. I know all of us in the Philadelphia area now will be Portland Timber fans to make sure they beat NYCFC. But let's talk about the news that led up to the game. The COVID protocol issues came out. 11 players were on protocol. Dave, as soon as you heard that news break, what were your thoughts?
I mean, again, it's God no. It was the worst case scenario for probably the biggest game of the season. I think it sounds harsh, but I think it's not as bad if it happens in the lead up to the Red Bulls game. I don't think people are that upset about it or that impacted by it. Sort of, do you know what I mean, you're one game away from the finals. You're one game away from winning the entire thing. And of course, it's going to upset people. People are going to be mad. People are going to be angry. And it's probably the worst time for it to happen.
Yeah.
I think I said to you, the main hope was that they had two of the main three centre backs playing. Andre Blake was there, and they had Leon Flack in the midfield, so sort of a workhorse, like the engine room in the midfield. They only had one of those things, which is Leon Flack, because Aurelien Collin was dug up from the dead, managed to play a full 90 minutes, and they had to play Matt Freese in goal. Obviously, Andre Blake wasn't there, and I think if obviously people who watched the game, you look at that first goal, probably doesn't happen if Andre Blake's in goal. Probably doesn't happen.
I can agree with that. So, and I'm just going to comment on the whole situation first before I even get into the game, which, like you said, it's if you had played the Red Bull, I think you'd feel a little bit more confident. And it wouldn't be as much of a blow if you lost. So like, all right, it sucks, but like we were so close to that, to get into there. And I really do think that if we were fully healthy, we would have won that game. And we'll get into the more detail about it. But to go back to your point, I actually, before the game started, Dave, I don't know if you know Kyle the Baby from Twitter. He's a local Union fan. We see him comment on Union Twitter all the time. I actually ran into him right before the game. We were talking a bit. And one of the things I mentioned was how impactful Jacob Glesnes and Jack Elliott are for this team. Yeah. And I said, you're going to see a lot of changes. That right there is going to be your biggest blow today.
Yeah.
You've not seen this team without them all year long. I mean, literally all season long. And you don't realize how well they move the ball forward until you don't have them in that lineup. And you saw it. And first of all, huge credit to Colin and Finley. I thought they played excellent considering their situation, especially Colin. I actually thought he played pretty well. I thought he's one of the better players on the pitch. But you didn't see that risky play moving forward from either of those players.
No.
One, maybe that's not as much of their style compared to the other two. But two, you couldn't afford to do that. You didn't have the bodies to be risky with it. So I agree with you. Missing out on Jack and Jake was huge. Now, going to the goal that you mentioned. So they score the goal, the 63rd minute. The crowd goes nuts. The ball comes back the other way. And it was, I think, a center back that struck the first shot at Freese. And to your point, Freese kind of, he doesn't really send the shot off far enough. He shoots it off to the right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think Blake does push that away, or at least captures it better than Matt did.
Yeah. I think the swerve of the ball wrong-footed him a bit. You can sort of see he went one way and sort of wrong-footed him. But again, as you said, like the ball was pushed out too centrally, right in
Yeah.
the right to a NYCFC player. And I mean, I know I see people online going, "Oh, Bizo's fault for not for the goal. He should have been covering the man." It's sort of like in that situation, it happens so fast. You're sort of on the edge of the box. You're playing out wide. You don't want the one guy to come in, and you're sort of watching your guy out wide, and then
Yeah.
this has come from a player that's played the right back position, and the guy just shoots from 35 yards and not expecting it, and everything happens so quick. Keeper saves it, rebound, plays it across the 6 yard box, and obviously, I think Morales was there to score. So I mean, again, it happened so quickly, and I don't think again people I know Bizo didn't have the best of nights, as we'll discuss a second go in a minute, but
Yeah.
it all happened so quickly. The time it takes to by the time you sort of readjusted to realizing there's been a shot and you see where the ball's gone, it was way too late to go. And I think they had the bod. They obviously were first to react, not just to the rebound, but to the second ball, which went into the box, and wasn't really much that could have been done about it.
Yeah, you think back on the season so far. Andre Blake doesn't really have any bad rebounds. For the most part, when he punches it out, he punches it out pretty effectively. And I think that's what
Yeah,
you missed from. I mean, and fast forward a little bit here. Huge credit to Matt Freeze for stepping in, and he didn't do anything wrong for the most part throughout the night. He was in good positions. He was aggressive. He came out when he needed to. He just did his job to the best of his ability. He did have one really great save shortly after that goal when he dives across to the right and forces it away with his right hand. So he made the moment when he made the most of his moments when he could, but unfortunately that was the one where you're like, Andre Blake probably doesn't have that go to that direction leading to the goal. Um, but I just kind of talking about the change of momentum. As soon as
yeah,
that goal went in off the own goal from Gazdag's pass, the place erupted. I don't know if you saw my video I posted on Twitter.
yes, yeah,
Dude, the place was as loud as I've ever heard it, and huge credit to the fans. From when you're inside the stadium itself on the lower levels, you hear how loud it is, but you don't really hear it because you're kind of in it. When
yeah,
you're in the
maybe, yeah,
when you're in the press box, you're elevated, so you can hear it more. And the union union, that chant during the corner kicks was louder. When they scored the goal, that place was loud. The Doop, you didn't just hear the Doop song from the river end, you heard it throughout the entire stadium. Like the whole stadium collectively was singing as loud as they possibly can. So that was really cool, and it's a shame that it didn't last more than 90 seconds. Um,
yeah. I think that was the moment, wasn't it? I think if they could have held off that little onslaught that NYCFC were going to have from the kickoff, or even if they'd just managed to, regain possession from that kickoff, it would have given the place a bigger lift. Because at that point, it's
yeah,
sort of like, okay, we've got momentum now, but it just completely sucked the life out of. Not, I'm not saying it's going to say like it completely sucked the life out of the crowd, but it sucked the life out of the moment. And at that point, then
yeah,
they were level. The momentum was with NYCFC. They knew that obviously they were in control. It was their game to lose at 0-0, and obviously at 1-0, it becomes sort of not the Union's. Well, obviously the Union, it was the Union's game to lose, but it obviously at that point the pressure was sort of a little bit more off NYCFC in terms of being the favourites. They'd then had to chase the game. They had to get themselves back into it,
yeah.
and I think that probably was what woke them up. I think maybe they did um, somewhat underestimate the Union coming into things. I don't know, perhaps if they did or not, but I don't think they really posed a threat until they actually scored the goal.
No, I completely agree with you. I thought the Union actually played better through the first
Yeah,
half. And I think overall they were the better team that night. You can't convince me otherwise. They were more aggressive. They did well to control the ball. They were stout defensively when they needed to be. They really kept Matt Freese out of trouble for the most part. Like I said, he didn't do anything either overly aggressive or overly cautious. He just kind of did his job to the best of his abilities, but the
yeah,
defense helped him get to that point. But just from knowing, soccer and knowing how the sport works, the most dangerous time of any match is right after you score a goal
yeah,
because that's when your guard's down, and we say it all the time. If you can just make it through the first 5 minutes after you score a goal, you know begin to settle back into the match compared to that getting off that high when you first score, and that's
yeah.
unfortunately what happened. One of the questions I have for you is like, do you think that happens with the starting 11? Do you think that momentum
Um,
kind of gets too much for them and they lose it?
I mean, it's hard to say, isn't it? Because it's two completely different variables in a sense.
Yeah,
Like, um, again, there's not been a match of this sort of importance or status this year that we can really sit there and say, yeah, it's happened before, because it hasn't. This is the first time it's ever happened, especially with a weekend lineup with a lot of second team players, if you know what I mean, like second, you know what I mean, like substitute players.
Yeah.
And maybe the moment did get too big for them. Maybe it was sort of like, oh my god, we're actually winning this game. Like, perhaps they did get caught in the moment, but
Yeah.
again, I don't think maybe they could have pressured the defender when he was 35 yards out from goal. But I think the last
Sure.
thing you expect sometimes is a defender to shoot. We've seen it with Glasnes plenty of times this year.
Yep.
But again, I think
Or
sometimes the last thing you expect is for someone to shoot, and when they managed to strike a ball that sweetly, okay, it didn't actually go in, but when you manage to get the curve and swerve on that, it's always going to cause havoc,
well, that's
especially when the union were
no.
as deep as they were.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the point that you've preached all season. Sometimes this team was just too afraid to shoot, but if you do shoot the ball and you put it on target, anything can happen.
Yeah,
I mean, sure, if Jose Martinez takes a strike from 35 yards out, odds are he's not going to score. But if it hits the crossbar, if it bounces off the goalie's hands, if it hits a defender, there's so many things that can happen when you just put the ball on target.
yeah,
And that's what you have to think about, and that's what they did. And credit to NYCFC for reacting that way. I thought it was a well executed plan for them to say, "Hey, we're restarting. Let's just attack them, shoot, and boom, you got the goal out of it." It's a tip your hat to them. They did the right thing at the
yeah,
moment in time. But fast forward a little bit, now, and it's funny because as soon as that goal went in, before I continued the next goal, I literally said to myself, like, "Oh my god, they're going to do this. Like, they're actually going to win this game." And it was
yeah,
like just this moment of like, wow, like can we actually do it? Now, do I think they would have gone to Portland and won with this lineup? No, I don't think so.
yeah.
I think Portland would have probably beat us like 2-0 at the end of the day. But fast forward now, uh, Jim Curtin only brings on Bueno for McGlynn before the third goal. Do you agree with that substitution mindset before the second NYCFC goal happened?
Um,
Because I know people were pissed off. I'm just gonna put it out there.
that's a tough one.
It's a what if, like how do you
Yeah.
really?
Again, I think, as you said, like if he does do so, I mean, I think at that point in the game, I know obviously, I think he put Bueno on to sort of try and shore things up, and I think
Yeah,
perhaps he did have 1 eye on extra time with that sort of change. But I think again, when NYCFC scored at that point, the momentum was in their favour. Do you know what I mean? They were the ones pressing the game. I think Jim perhaps looked at it in the sense of, we'll take what we've got, we'll go into extra time with it. I think that's perhaps why he went with the more defensive sub. We'll try and soak up the pressure
yeah,
and, save the subs for extra time. Because again, he didn't have any really real attacking options in the bench apart from Paxton Harrison. So again, it was sort of like, it begs the question of who was he meant to bring on? Because he left Darvo out, he left Matt Real out. So I mean,
and
again, who do you bring
Fontano's
on?
there. I
For
mean, you
obviously
have
Fontana, yeah, sorry, but I mean, like, do you know what I mean? Fontana hasn't played like 2 months. So again, is he going to be 100%?
nor has Fontana contributed either. Really, I mean, he
No.
hasn't done anything since what the CCL game when he scored a goal. I mean,
Yeah.
really, if you want to look at it, I mean, granted, has he been given a chance to? No, so that's another argument. But I think if you're bringing Paxton on to the match, you also have to think about if this match goes to PKs. You need to have Casper there at this point.
Yeah.
You have to have him on the pitch. I mean, you just you can't take him out. He is your best shot at scoring compared to Gazdag. So you're not going to take Gazdag out. So do you take Jamiro out? Jamiro had been playing fairly well the whole night. So
See, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, what do you do? I mean, at that point, do you leave your more experienced players in on the game when
exactly.
it's such a tight game and such a big moment, or do you then give it to the kids? And perhaps those are sort of moments that can crush teenagers, especially at that age and that sort of level. It can crush them, especially if they make a mistake or if they miss a crucial penalty or something. That's what. And again, I know, I think going back to your point about Casper, I know people were very critical about Casper on Sunday night. But I mean, again, you need someone like Casper for penalties because you haven't really got any reliable penalty takers on the field. I know people
Yeah.
go, "Oh, Jack McGlynn," but I mean, being realistic, Jack McGinn's taken 1 penalty in his life,
Yeah.
competitive penalty in his life. Who's to say that what he does that again and he misses, or he misses it, or he has it saved, whatever? Like, There was no guarantee Jack McGlynn was going to score. And again, they didn't
No.
have Jack Elliott. Trying to think who else took
Yeah.
penalty.
Jack Elliott.
Obviously, Gazdag would have taken the penalty actually, but I mean, again, you'd have had maybe one natural penalty taken on the pitch.
Yeah. And you have to think that way. You have to think about the long term, which makes it difficult. And that's why I'm trying to. People, it's not a lot of people. Some people have been very critical about Curtin in that particular match, and I get it. You're upset, but like my fucking god, lay off the guy. Like he just took this team, who, like historically speaking, should not be in this position. Because
Yeah,
if you make it deep in the CCL, which we've talked about time and time again, you should not be making the Eastern Conference Finals. But yet here we are. So you cannot dismiss what Curtin has done because of one moment. And I agree with you. I think another point that I was looking at is how aggressive NYCFC was playing against us. No offense to Paxton, he's just not the guy. He was going to get bullied off the ball any chance he got. Same with, we saw that with Brendan too. When Brendan was first starting out, he just wasn't big enough to handle the pressure.
yeah,
Casper can handle that, and he can body his way. And he actually had a few decent moments throughout the match where he used his body to his advantage. So you have to put that
yeah,
into consideration too. And Jamiro, not the biggest guy, but Jamiro muscles his way through things. Paxton just isn't there yet. He's much more of a finesse
no,
player than he is a Sergio Santos or Corey Burke or even Casper, who's going to use his body to his advantage. I agree with you. I can see both sides. I get it. If if Mbaizo kicks that ball away and we go into extra time and we happen to win, none of this becomes an issue. But
no.
because of some crazy mistake, now it's a problem. So I'll use that as a segue. Dave, you want to talk about the second NYCFC goal?
I think it was just a disaster from start to finish. Like a long ball forward, which in most days probably Bazo deals with it. He gets
Hmm.
caught underneath the ball, doesn't realise where he or the ball is.
Yeah,
They take advantage and they score. And I know I've seen some people on Twitter going, "Well, Colleen should have prevented the second goal by putting in a block or something like that." I was like, "Well, shut the fuck up." That's such a difficult situation to be in when the ball goes across the box like that. If Colin gets a touch on it, there's a 75% chance he scores no goal. That's just a
sure.
matter of fact. There's
Yeah.
a 75% chance he scores no goal because he's sliding back towards his own goal, and the only way he's going to make contact is sliding backwards into it.
Hmm.
And with the way the ball was curled across the 6 yard box, that's coming off its studs and potentially going into the back of the net. It's a difficult ball to clear. I mean, in itself, I think it's a difficult ball to deal with as well. I mean, those are the most dangerous sort of crosses when you're stretched defensively and you've got one-on-one matchups inside the 6 yard box. You've got low crosses coming in. Again, it was obviously they did well to take upon the opportunity and snatch on it. Again, it was just, I mean, there's a bad mistake from Bizo. I feel bad for him because again, that was his
Bad
first
for him
game
too.
back from COVID, and
And I thought he played fine. I thought he actually
yeah,
done. He was attacking offensively. He was making them. He was doing what you knew Pal couldn't do offensively, which
yeah,
was trying to push the ball up toward the pitch. He had that one time in the box in the beginning half of the game when he gets brought down just on the edge of the box. The defenders have to be aware that he can beat them with a move,
yeah,
which we've seen him like Powell just can't do that. He's not going to typically do that. So you have to, be aware of his abilities. So you saw that early on, and I thought he played decent overall. And it's a shame that it happened. As soon as it happened, I was just like, oh no, like I felt
yeah,
bad for him. I didn't even feel bad that they were losing. I felt bad for him because you could see how distraught he was. And you
yeah,
see Matt Freese trying to, console him, and all the players are falling down on the ground, like just like shocked, like they can't believe that happened. But you're right. Listen, I used to play right back. I used to play defense. You're right. If Colin had put his foot out, good chance he scores a goal inadvertently.
yeah.
Now,
And again, then
maybe
everyone slates him, going, "He should have left the ball."
he's
Catch him.
damned if he does, damned if he
Yeah,
doesn't. No, I get it. I've scored an own goal in that same exact position. I get it. I get the possibility
so
of it happening. So,
yeah,
and again, you can't fault Colin because he had played well up until that point. You just have to realize sometimes it's just how the ball bounces. You get an unlucky bounce. One thing I thought of though was if maybe Mbaizo didn't hear that someone was behind him, if he didn't feel someone behind him, if Andre Blake is in that, does he tell Olivier about the guy behind him? Is maybe Olivier not
um,
aware? I don't know if there was a miscommunication, and maybe it's why he kind of got pushed off the ball from behind.
maybe I think again, perhaps he didn't think he was under pressure, but it looked more like he'd lost where the ball was as opposed to
Agreed.
where he was, if you know what I mean. But again, it's just an unfortunate situation to go into, and it's just a frustrating one. It's anytime you lose or your season's ended because of a goal like that, it's always frustrating, isn't it?
Oh, of course. I mean, it sucks because you could have won. That's
Yeah,
the worst part. If you were losing 2-0, you're just getting blown out, and the shit happens as your third goal. Okay, then whatever. The night was not your night, but it felt like it was our night. It felt like
yeah,
we could have done it. Um, so then the final whistle blows. The game's over. Credit to the fans because as soon as the goal happened, they got louder and louder. When the trophy was being presented, all you could hear was the Sons of Ben chanting for the most part.
yeah,
You really couldn't hear. So credit for them to disrupt in the trophy presentation. And if you're NYC as a fan, you know, excuse me, I would rather beat a team when it's healthy. I don't want to be a team when they're completely just dismantled with injuries or
yeah,
health problems. So I'm sure it feels great that they get to advance to the final, and that's the card they're dealt, and they did well with the card they were dealt. But when you look back on the season, people are going to say, "Oh, well, NYCFC only made the final because of the COVID situation." So it almost
yeah.
puts like an asterisk mark on their season. Look on to 2022. I believe it's in 10 weeks the season comes back, so you're right back at it within 2.5 months. What are you looking for in the off season? What should we be as fans paying attention to?
Uh, I think obviously an interest. I mean, no one wants to admit it, but a big one's going to be what happens with Jim Curtin because
Yep.
obviously the Cincinnati interest is not going away.
No.
Um, I mean, obviously, I don't know if it was to you, but Jim didn't seem. I mean, I know they've been eliminated from like the final, well, the conference final, one game away from obviously from the MLS Cup final. So again, you deserve. I can understand the negativeness, like the negativity surrounding like the press conference is a bit down,
Sure.
but sort of the reluctance to obviously they were speaking about how close his team was. He didn't really say like, "Oh no, we are really close. Like we've got something special growing here. We really are looking. We've got some great players in the future." It was didn't really mention any of that or part of him being close. He sort of he only spoke about certain players. It was like these are older players and their windows are closing. So again, it wasn't Jim didn't really address himself in terms of looking towards the future, which was obviously an interesting point. Maybe I misconstrued the comments, but I thought that was quite
I
interesting in
th-
terms
I
of
think people agree with you because I actually talked to a fan the other day, and they mentioned. I don't know if you remember. Was it I think 2 weeks ago when the whole Cincinnati news first broke? Jim Curtin says, like, okay, for example, I'm a reporter. I say, hey Jim, there's news about Cincinnati coming around. What are your thoughts? I think as a Union fan, you want to hear. I don't care what Cincinnati has to say. I'm a Philadelphia Union coach. I want to be here. This is my home. My family's here. Blah 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 blah. Right? He didn't say that. He said,
yeah,
well, I have 2 years left of my contract, and here I am. It's like, okay, that's not really the most confident way to describe it. So I think fans kind of took that to heart a bit. Like, they're not really sure. Jim hasn't necessarily went out in public and said, I am going to be here the next 2 years, no matter what. He hasn't made it that candid. Going to your point with the press conference, I agree with you. I thought he was pretty emotional in terms of how candid he was. Jim Curtin typically walks the line in terms of what he should say and shouldn't say.
yeah,
But I agree. He didn't really say like, "Hey, I can't wait to come back next season. We're gonna take it back again. We're gonna bring back our guys and try." It wasn't that rah moment for next year. It was much more of a somber like, "What the hell just happened?"
yeah.
And agree with me or disagree with me on this. Do you think he took a shot at Philadelphia ownership in that press conference by mentioning the NYCFC oil money and the bench players they
Um,
have?
I'm gonna say no. I mean, obviously, I think there's more than a reference to the fact that NYCFC are essentially owned by Man City, or they're like
Yep.
big partners in Man City. So again, they got a big partnership there. I think that's sort of where perhaps the all money comment came from, because obviously Man City are owned by multi-billionaires. I think that might have been where the comment came from. But again, I think you see sort of managers all the time, especially at like I don't know. I don't think he was taking any shots at ownership, but again, I don't think it really filled anyone with confidence
No.
that
So the reason why I kind of ask you about that is because today Jonathan Tannenwald brought a piece out from the Inquirer saying that Ernst Tanner is going to be actively looking for a striker. So
yeah,
we talked about this before. I know people don't like Casper. I get it. But you can't really fault Casper because that's just not the kind of player he is. He's not going to go out there and score 25 goals and blow by people and be this prolific goal scorer. He is a poacher, as we've talked about time and time again. He
Yeah,
needs someone like Sergio Santos to be healthy and playing at a high level for him to excel. Unfortunately, he was basically by himself all year. You could not rely on Sergio or Corey Burke for more than 3 games at a time before one of them got hurt and they switched places.
yeah,
So Tanner's kind of actively going, but the way I was kind of correlating between the two is, if Jim does have interest in leaving for Cincinnati or for another club in general, you know, maybe this is his way of saying like, hey guys, like spend the money, put money into our players that we have, not just the academy, but our current roster. Give us a striker who can
yeah,
compete with a $10 million guy off the bench, which is what New York City has, and other
yeah.
teams, they put their money in. So
I mean, there's talks today that obviously Atlanta United has spent a lot of money in the
yeah,
recent years. I mean, they signed what's his name? They signed Luis Araujo just recently, and they're about to sign um, obviously a very highly rated young player from Argentina, and Thiago Almada, for about 22 million pounds slash dollars. So again, that's just going to raise their team's stock even more. There's
mhm,
talks that Toronto FC might get Lorenzo Insigne. So
wow,
again, that could be absolutely ridiculous. Again, the way the league's going, they're both in the Eastern Conference, and they're both getting, well, especially Toronto FC about to get a superstar for the level, an absolute superstar for this league. Again, then the unit are going to need to end up getting the player that will allow them to take that next step and allow them to not just become an attraction in a sense. You know what I mean? Because some people do go to these games to watch players. Like when Sebastian Giovinco's around, people want to go watch Sebastian Giovinco in the earlier days and things like that. Thierry Henry, they
yeah,
need that perhaps not that similar older age player, but a similar player that is a star name. Not just a star name, but it's going to be prolific. It's going to have character, like Harry Mukhtar. Um, like Joseph Martinez when he first obviously burst onto the scene at Manchester United. Those sort of players and what they need to have. We mentioned in the last podcast. They need a striker or a forward thinking player like that to give them the extra dimension, to give them the extra option when, if their backs are against the wall, give him the ball and he'll run 30, 40 yards and he'll score. They don't
yeah,
have that. They don't have that in
no,
this team. I know everyone will go, we've got Gazdag, we've got Miro, Jamiro Montero. It just doesn't work. They're not players that can pick up the ball from mid inside your own half and run the length of the pitch. They haven't got a player like that. That's
no.
their biggest issue.
So I know a lot of talks right now are about Jamiro possibly not being here next year, which then pushes the envelope more. You need someone who can. I mean, whether you like Jamiro or not, whether you thought he was worthy of a 10 or maybe he was an 8, whatever you want to call him, he was still one of the most creative players we had. He ran his ass off every single time we had him on the field. He was one of our better players, and if you're losing him, then there's more reason to then go out and try to acquire someone with extreme talent who can be creative and who can score goals. Because that's the thing, Jameer was not a goal scorer at all, really. He scored what, 2 goals this year? One of them was that fluke goal off Columbus. I think it went off a defender.
Yeah,
Um, he just wasn't a goal scorer. So if you're going to lose at least his creativity and what he can do is in the 10 spot or the 8 spot, then you have to go out and spend money. And we see this in a lot of leagues, whether it be the NBA, the Philadelphia Phillies, and the MLB, who don't want to spend any money at all. If you want to compete at the highest level,
you need
yeah,
to. Yeah,
you need, yeah. Do you want a great supporting cast? Absolutely. The Philadelphia Union have a great defensive back line. They have the best keeper in the league. Fantastic. Do you have young prospects like Jack McGlynn, Paxton Anderson, or even Daniel Gazdag, who are good core players in the midfield? Yes, you have that. You don't have that one piece. And just think about it now, just in terms of the value of what you have right now in this product. The Philadelphia Union are the hottest ticket in Philadelphia out of the 5 major sports, without question. I don't care if the Eagles make the fucking playoffs. They're in the wild card hunt at like 6 and 7. They're not a hot commodity right now. You have the Union at the highest they've ever been ever in franchise history.
yeah,
Go out there and grab somebody like I'm just like Mukhtar or whoever, put him in there and bring more people to the stadium. You
yeah.
have your window to capitalize on this success is right now. Don't wait 5 years when this team has now started going down. Do it now. I mean, just think about the hype that will be entering next February in 10 and a half weeks if you have some elite player on your roster. Um, so I agree with you. They have to go out and spend the money. If you want to keep Jim Curtin long term, you have to give him a reason to be here long term. And if that's high quality players that he can compete with the likes of New York City or the Red Bulls or Toronto, then do what you have to do because the
Yeah.
players love playing for him, and that's honestly worth the money.
And I'm going to say this: there'll be no worse look for the ownership and for the team if Jim Curtin leaves a team that was literally a game away from the MLS Cup in the
That's true.
CONCACAF Champions League to go to the worst team in the MLS this year.
That's
There'll be
very
no
true.
sadder and worse indictment of this team if he decides to go there because they've got more money for him to build and spend to team on. That'll be the worst indictment for this team, and it'll be um, quite tragic, really. And again, I think it would put people off wanting to come and take over from Jim.
Yeah.
Quite
No,
frankly,
and also you could look at it this way: if you're a free agent and you want to go play for a team, if you're a coach, you want to coach for a team, you want to know that your franchise around you is willing to spend the money or at least provide you with the roster to compete at a high level. And the reality is that right now the Union are known for not spending money. Statistically speaking, they're one of the most successful franchises in the league that spend the least amount of money. I mean, tip your hat off to the academy. Great, good job. You're able to find diamonds in the rough like Kai Wagner for absolutely no money whatsoever and put on the field. Fantastic.
yeah,
Congratulations. That's amazing. But if you're saving so much money on this fantastic core, just imagine what this fantastic core can do when you put in the money into one player who can change this franchise over as a whole. For right now, Flock, McGlynn, you know, Elliott, Glessons, they're all here next year. They're expected to play next year. You have your core in place. As you know, in sports with the Eagles, the Phillies, your windows are tight in sports. You only have
mm.
3 to 5 years, maybe. I mean, how long do you think this window can last for this particular group?
Um, I think this is why football's such a perhaps more of a special sport compared to 20 others. Like, I wouldn't say you really ever have a window. I think there
Okay,
never really is a window because of how I don't know how to structure it. But I think just of how how the way that things work. Like, I mean, like obviously you look in England, Man United dominated English football for 25 years.
yeah,
25 years before that, Liverpool dominated English football. Man City had dominated the Premier League for the last 6 or 7 years, with a couple of other teams win the league as well. But do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think there is ever like really a window in this sport. Like, it's all about your recruitment. It's all about how obviously you manage your team because again, like you could have. I mean, obviously, I'll explain it. Sports, a lot of sports are the same. Really, like depends how players play. Depends how you're coaching your tactics. But there's some sort of like how do I explain it? This sort of game is so much more different. Again, you have these academy players that can come in, they can make a difference. 2 to 3 years time, the Union could have can find an academy striker come in, and he could come in and blaze the world on fire and score
it's
and
true.
become the next hot commodity. Whereas in the NFL, um, in the NFL, you know, NHL, MLB, NBA, you don't really have that. You don't really have that specific thing. Like everyone has a draft, everyone has these things. You find these diamonds in the rough, fair enough. But whereas here, you don't have to spend any assets to get these players. They're already there. They're already at home for you, and they can burst onto the scene whenever they want to.
It's
Whereas
true.
you got one chance a year to get these players in the NFL and things like that. So that's where perhaps things are a bit different. And the fact that I don't again, I just don't think there's ever a window in this sport because things
That's a
can change so quickly. They can
that's a
change
fair
so quickly.
perspective. That's a different perspective I don't really think about. The way the franchises are structured makes a difference in terms of your competitive window.
Yeah,
I
there's
guess if
not again, obviously there's a salary cap, but then the draft is nowhere near as important.
no,
There's no free agency, there's no bidding war on players. You make transfers, you do transfers. So again, there's never sort of a window because you never know. The union could get bought out by billionaires and they could end up buying all the top American players. And do you know what I mean? Like, there's never a window. There's so many different variables that can happen, which can change or turn the game upside down. But as you said, obviously there are players that are going to leave. It's just about how you replace them because again, you don't have these sort of windows in the NFL where um, a team from Europe looks at and goes, "Oh, I like Leon Flack. We're going to put a bid on and sign Leon Flack." You don't really have that in the NFL where middle of the season, obviously you do get trades, but do you know what I mean? Like a team from out of nowhere is going to come in like just steal your best player away. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in the
Mhm.
MLS and other leagues, it's a lot different to that. So again, that's why there's never a window. It's always, things are always moving and changing. Um, I think that's sort of the aspect I look at it.
No, yeah, it's a good point of view. Again, for us with American sports, I think that the thought of a window is so kind of hammered into the way we view our teams. But I think it's a great perspective for people. Like I know a lot of people right now on Twitter are worried, like how long are McGlynn going to be here? How long is Sullivan going to be here? X, Y, and Z, and they're worried that this group of players is only going to be here for X amount of time, and then once that happens, the unknown comes, and that's what people are afraid of. So I think it's a great way to spin it and kind of gives a different perspective on how we view the sport as a whole compared to American sports, where it's like you said, vastly different. But we wanted to just do a short episode tonight. I know it's like 39 minutes, 49 minutes, so it's not terribly short, but we just kind of want to give our thoughts on it. Dave, before we wrap up, I know next week or next couple weeks we want to talk about the roster and who do you think is going to leave? How do you expect this lineup to be moving forward? Do you have any final thoughts on the 2021 Philadelphia Union season before we close the show?
Obviously, it's been a fun year, I think, for me and you as well. It's been able
Yeah,
to, actually been able to cover the team and follow their adventures all over North America, which has been great fun. Again, it's been another step forward. I know they won the Support Shield last year, but they made even greater strides this year with the CONCACAF Champions League and
sure.
competing in the playoffs, actually competing in the playoffs as well, winning a couple of playoff games and going that extra step. It's been a great year. I mean, there's obviously been more highs than lows, although you could argue the lows have probably outweighed the highs at times. It's
Yeah,
been great to see the academy players perhaps become more dependent or more dependable in terms of
yeah,
Jack McGlynn, Paxton Harrison, as opposed to the start of the year, which we didn't actually think we would really be seeing many academy players. We thought it would
no,
be Anthony Fontana and Matt Real, but it's become increasingly clear that because they're not signing because obviously I don't think they're going to have their contracts extended, that perhaps they're not going to be as involved. If you know what I mean?
yeah. No, I agree. I think that
Uh,
I think if you look back on the season of 2021, you would say you exceeded expectations, but you also learned a lot about these young players.
yeah,
And if you have any concern about the Philadelphia Union moving forward, I think you have to look at what you've learned this year about whether it be Leon Flock or even someone like Jack Elliott, who we've already had for a couple of years, and how much he has progressed.
yeah,
Um, I agree with you. It's a great season. I think this team will be more beloved than the Supporter Shield team. In 10 years, when you look back on it, you're going to remember this team and the heart they put in, the run they had. I'd say even more than the Supporter Shield
yeah,
because you just fell in love with this team from top to bottom. You just fell in love with all the players. So, like you said, it was great. I mean, we've been having a great time doing this. As tired as we have been sometimes dealing with it, it's been a lot of fun.
yeah,
But we'll have another episode probably next week or the week after regarding the roster, and then pretty soon, Dave, we're back at it with the
yeah. I mean, it's
2022
only
season.
only a couple of months off, and the Union are back in action, which is again, it's going to be an interesting one because having such a short break as opposed to last year when the season sort of kicked back up in May. They had 4 months off. The Union have got 2 months off now because of the World Cup next year, so they're going to have to squeeze the entire season in quickly. So
Yeah,
again, it could be interesting. We might not see many players actually leave the team in before the season starts. It could be in the summer, with the summer months when the
yeah,
season is fully underway, which is when they lose players.
that's true. Yeah, so let's run it back with the same guys we got, I guess, for now.
Yeah,
But
I
anyway,
mean,
we'll wrap it. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I don't know obviously what the MLS transfer window is like. I don't know if it's similar to the European ones. If not, because I mean I know obviously the Union want to sign a striker, but I do know it's going to be really difficult for them. It's going to be very difficult for the Union to find a striker at that sort of level because um, again, I mean these teams in Europe. I know I've seen a couple of people chucking Timo Pukki's name around. There's no chance Timo Pukki is going to leave Norwich in the middle of a relegation scrap in January. If he's going to go, he's going to go at the end of the season. That won't be till June.
Hmm.
So again, that's another thing, right? I mean, it's going to take them. You're going to have to wait 4 or 5 months. At that point, you're midway through the season. They're going to need.
Yeah,
They're going to want to strike him before the season starts. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for sure.
No, I agree. I mean, it's gonna be a lot to talk about. We're gonna see if we can bring a guest on to dive more in depth into the MLS transfer window and everything else in between. But
Yeah,
we'll wrap up the show now with our sponsors. We have Manscaped, get 20% off plus free shipping with the code AATBirds on manscaped.com. We have OddsJam, the number one software platform for sportsbook bandits. They use an arbitrage calculator and more, so you can never lose a bet again. Sign up today at oddsjam.com via AAT Birds. Check out Statement Games. Is a new and fun way to fantasy sports entertainment. You can win gift cards and prizes. Free to sign up at statementgames.com. Lastly, Lot Terrain Watches, lotterrain.com. Use code AATBird for 10% off at checkout for some of their great watches they have on selection. And then lastly, we have the Across the Pitch gear and all the AAT sports gear at the network shop at aatsportsnetwork.com/shop. You can get all of our stuff, all the other shows, and get something really quick before the holidays
Yeah.
finish up. But like I said, Philadelphia Union falls short, unfortunately, in the Eastern Conference Final with their shorthanded roster. We'll be back in a couple weeks to do a transfer window slash player episode, and until then, we'll be anxiously awaiting the start of next year. Have a good one, guys.